A few words this morning on the subject, the art of healing. The art of healing. It is quite necessary to understand a few fundamentals in discussing this subject, the art of healing. We read so much about teams of men finding out about this chemical, that chemical, this antibiotic, in search for healing of the many, many ills of human beings. And they do find things which offset symptoms and at least seem to eradicate various diseases, but there are others that crop up, and sometimes of a worse nature. And so they have not really found the healing agent. And so one of these fundamentals which we must realize in discussing the art of healing is that in healing of any disease or inharmony in the body, we must remove the cause. That's the first thing to realize. You can take many things that will offset the symptoms of the disease and will eradicate it seemingly. But unless you remove the cause, it will reappear in some other way, not necessarily just as that particular disease. And so that's the first thing we must understand is, in discussing this art of healing, in understanding the art of healing, we must remove the cause of the disease. Let me give you one illustration of the common cold, and you can apply this to any disease. In the common cold, it is, of course, supposed to be caused by this, that, and the other thing, viruses. I don't know if they've ever found what does cause the cold. But I do know, and you know, that they're very disagreeable. And they prevent us from being what we should be, real children of God. And so these common colds are caused by this simple thing, that due to the breaking of health laws, due to overeating or improper eating, greed, the bloodstream gets filled with carbon, known as toxins and many other things. Now that toxin floating around in your bloodstream attacks the various membranes of the body, especially the nasal membrane and the membrane of the respiratory tract, and then the virus gets in. The virus is there, but realize it is this fact, this predisposing cause of the blood being filled with carbon, toxins, from overeating, from breaking health laws, improper eating, not watching the tendencies which you have. If you have a tendency of a weak digestion, you have to watch it. Otherwise you will fill your bloodstream up with these impurities, then the cold is upon you. And you treat the symptoms from everything you can find in the medicine closet, finally it goes away. But the cause is that we have broken health laws. We have been greedy, or we have not followed and watched those inherited tendencies of weaknesses which we have. Now that's the real cause of the thing, is it not? And so that's the first fundamental point we must understand if we are going to practice the art of healing, is to remove the cause. Treat the symptoms, of course. You have to do that while they're in the body. Get some relief. But look underneath that and find what's the cause of this business. What's the cause of disease? And eradicate the cause. That's the first fundamental. Now the next thing to realize, fundamental thing is, that in all healing agencies, the main factor is life force. Not the drugs necessarily, not the antibiotics. They stimulate the life force to flow. It's the life force that is the healing agent. And that life force is God's cosmic energy in you and in me. That's the healing agent, nothing else. We may take some aspirin, we feel better. But the aspirin simply allows the life force to function, that's all. So realize the second fundamental is that life force is the healing agent. Never forget that. It's all right to take medicine if you feel you should, but never lose sight of the fact that underlying all those things is the healing agency of life force within you. And that's God's power. God's power within you as life force is cosmic energy. And as your body has been made by that, and my body, from consciousness and life force, realize that that's the creating and curative power of all healing. God's presence in you and me as life force. Realize that. Master used to give a wonderful illustration. He would say, you take a dead man, lay him here on the table, fill him full of food and everything, and it won't do a thing. Why? Because the life force is not functioning. Will you remember that simple illustration? Life force is the key. Life force is the healing agent. Why not? Life force made us, directed by God's great intelligence. Life force flows through us harmoniously if we do not interfere with it, by greed and other things, the breaking of laws, many, many things, karmic impulses, karmic causes. Therefore realize, do everything you can to allow the proper flow of life force within you. That's the second fundamental thing to realize. Life force is the healing agent. You talk with any physician, any surgeon, they will say, we just simply repair things so, as they say, nature heals. Nature is nothing but the power of God in you and me, flowing as life force. So the second fundamental is to realize, not just hear it and then forget it, understand it, that life force is the healing agent within you. And third, and perhaps the greatest thing, is that the highest and greatest healing power within you is God Himself. God Himself, because, as I just said a minute ago, we are the product of what? God's consciousness plus its power. And that power in us is life force. That's the greatest healing agency we can have. And so, although we may take other means, never forget, the greatest healing agency within you is God. And to use Him, you have to know Him. You have to have God contact. You have to be one with Him. That's the greatest thing. That's the third fundamental thing, and of course, the greatest. And so the art of healing means that we must know how to consciously use the life force within us. Realize that now. The art of healing is nothing but that. You must know how to consciously use the life force within you, because the life force is the healing power of God. And of course we must remove the cause, otherwise how can we expect Divine Mother to put up with us eternally, breaking her laws? But we must consciously know how to use the life force within us. And that we can do in three ways: physically, by physical means, by mental means, and third and greatest, by God. It is so simple, the art of healing, if you remember these few things which we are discussing. Conscious use of life force within us is necessary by these three methods: physical means, mental means, and finally, when those two are exhausted and there's no other way left, then we go to God. Why not go to Him first? Or go to Him as you progress. As you're using physical means of drugs and medicine, use them. As you're using mental means of suggestion and the various mental healings of which I'll speak just a moment, never forget that God is behind it. And finally, there'll come a time when you will go to Him automatically. And if He wants you to use this or that, you'll use it. It doesn't make any difference as long as you get well, does it? As a man told me once, he said, make money honestly if you can, but make the money. So, get God. Get well, I mean. Use mental means, physical means if you have to, but get well. So don't forget that little thing. Next time you're taking in the aspirin and various other things, say, Father, I'm just doing this just to play the part in the drama of life. You are the one. I know that, and you can't get me away, but I can't suffer too much. That's the attitude, and that's true. If you're honest with God, He puts up with an awful lot and takes care of us. So realize that. that it's the conscious use of life force that's important. Now the physical means, just a word or two about the physical means in the conscious control of life force. Larry Marshall said, try medicine. Try medicine if you think you should. Do it. What of it? What harm? As long as you don't forget that God's the healing power behind it through his life force. Use common sense in your medicine, but never forget that God is behind as his healing power of life force. Now another thing to realize is this, that with this great exploration and science of the various healing factors of various compounds, they are bound to run across things which help the human being. There's no question about that. But nevertheless, unless they realize the underlying cause of disease, unless they go to God which is behind, another thing crops up because of this delusion in which we are living. And so, never forget that. They have all sorts of antibiotics for everything. But I notice we're still in trouble, and I think sometimes worse trouble. It's a different kind, but it's disease. It's inharmony. So let us not forget that whatever physical means we try, of drugs and different things, that God is still behind that. And he's the healing power. Now another thing to realize in using physical means, that is, if you go to a physician or a surgeon, realize this thing, and I've seen it so many times, that God works in any way he wants. How do you know he wants to heal you instantaneously? You don't. How do you know he wants to work through a certain medicine? How do you know he wants to work through a certain physician or surgeon? God's in that surgeon. God's in that physician. God's in the medicine. What's the matter with us? Why don't we realize that he can heal us in any way he wants? So as you use physical means, use them. It's all right if you feel that way. But never forget God is the healing power behind all physical means and agencies. Realize that there'll come a time when you'll supersede these things, but not unless you realize God in everything you do, trying to take him. If you take medicine, realize it's God in the medicine, his power. It's the life force that heals you. The medicine directs it a little bit here and there. And so in physical means, we also use heat and cold, as you all know. Heat, by the simple process of bringing more oxygen to the part through the bloodstream, liberates more life force in the part. That's what healing does. And cold. Cold is a wonderful agency if it is applied correctly. The yogis found out the method. It is not possible to give it to you at this time, but those of you who need it, get it. If you ask for it, you will receive it if you need it. This one thing, realize that cold stimulates the life force. Recalling it, it has left a certain part of your body. Inharmony is there. A pathology is there. The life force has retired. But this proper use of cold recalls it to that diseased part. And therefore cold is a wonderful agency to recall life force when it is used in the proper way. There's so much for the physical means of conscious direction of life force. Now let us go on to the mental effort. The mental effort, realize mental effort of conscious direction of life force. Never forget that. When you use your mind in any way, you are using it to consciously direct the life force within you. Never forget that. That's the important thing. It's wonderful to have a strong mind and use it. But the mental effort directs you in a conscious way through will to direct the life force. Mental effort now consciously directs your will in a positive way to direct life force. Let us take just, for instance, the Master's recharging exercises. Through that conscious use of will, mental effort, you direct the life force to the various muscles. I cannot emphasize too much the importance of doing regularly the recharging exercises of the 20 body parts, of which many of you know. You must use them every day. Don't miss a day. By so doing, by that mental effort, you, through your conscious will, direct the life force to the various body parts. And that's the healing agent. That's the sustaining agent. Why not use it? Now another thing is this. There are certain, then you may have a body part, like an arm just for instance, that is giving you trouble. If you will consciously direct the life force to that arm through the Master's recharging exercises in the proper way, without too much tension, and holding the life force there for a longer time, the life force will help. There's no question of a doubt. Also, I cannot emphasize too much the stomach exercise in the Master's recharging exercises. That's the weak part of us. And so we must regularly, every day, do that stomach exercise. Why? Because through your conscious mental effort, application of conscious will, you direct the life force to the weak part. And life force is the healing agent, and so the art of healing is carried out, consummated by doing that stomach exercise. And finally, one other comes to my mind, very important, is the Medulla Exercise, down here, those of you who know it. Realize that the cosmic energy comes in through your body, to your body, through the medulla center. So this point here, if you can consciously stimulate it, isn't that all right? Isn't that the proper thing to do? And so, mental effort, in a conscious way, directs the life force to function throughout the body, producing harmony. Now we also have another mental effort, which is, we might call, the Master used to call it, an assertive metaphysical reasoning. Assertive metaphysical reasoning. Now, that consciously directs the life force. In a conscious way, it's known as Christian Science, if you want to call it that. That's what it is. It's not so direct as the positive ways which the Master gave, but it is an assertive metaphysical reasoning. And by using that reasoning, like I am not this body, I am not this body, God is in me. If God is love and I am love, it's impossible for me to be sick or sinful. That's the truth. And so, in an indirect way, that directs the life force. But if you can positively know God as the life force within you, then that's more positive, more direct. And so, this mental effort of this metaphysical reasoning in a positive way, assertive metaphysical reasoning, we use it all the time in our work here, is good because it consciously directs the life force to heal us and restore harmony to the body. So that's the second way in which we can consciously control life force, and the third is healing by God's response. That's the greatest thing. Healing by God's response within you. God has made us from His consciousness and energy within us. And so, if we can, and this is the point, if you're going to use God to heal you, which is the highest and greatest thing, you've got to know Him, haven't you? And so the important thing is to know God, to have God contact. How? By prayer, by meditation, the different meditations of self-realization. And greatest of all, its techniques of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga, without a doubt, is the same techniques which Jesus and the disciples used. Kriya Yoga gives you contact with God within. If you have Him, realize it is God's power that is life force in you. It is God's consciousness that directs that life force. It is not too difficult to understand that if we contact God, we will have control of life force in a different way than by the physical means or by the mental means. We will have control of life force through a law which is above mental laws and physical laws. We will have control of life force within us through the spiritual law of God's presence. And as God has made all things, even our bodies, from His consciousness and its power of life force, you can see the greatest method of consciously controlling life force is to know God, to contact God. And as He is life force within us, as He is the great healing power within us, in its finality, if we can go direct to Him, we have the highest means in the art of healing. And so healing by God's response is the greatest thing. Healing by God's response realize when you get to God contact, understand this now. When you get God contact, you are utilizing a law far higher than physical or mental laws. In your own meditations, when you contact the Om vibration as God in you, you are setting loose within you certain powers which you cannot utilize by physical or mental means. You are superseding these physical and mental laws. You are allowing God to directly function in your body. You are removing all inhibitions which prevent the free flow of His great love and light within you. That's why the third method, God, is the greatest method. Now, one other thing that we must not forget is this, that as God has made us from His own consciousness, the perfect pattern is in God within us. The perfect pattern is in the divine consciousness within us, the pattern of perfect health. Now, if that pattern is within us, why not ask God to once more restore that perfect pattern to us? Why not ask Him? He did it for Jesus. In the case of Lazarus, the pattern was different, but God restored the perfect pattern and Lazarus lived. In the case of Master's Master, the pattern was that he should leave, but God kind of changed the pattern a little bit, and he stayed 15 years so that the Master could visit him. And I've seen the pattern changed in many cases concerning the Master, and I know there are people living nowadays who shouldn't be here according to the pattern. I know they are living because the pattern was changed. Why not ask God to do that for you? You are His child. I am His child. If it is His will, He can do it. Why not ask Him? Ask Him, but first get His contact, and you know He hears you. And so, the greatest thing in healing is God. The greatest thing is God contact. And having that, God can do it if He wants. I know the pattern can be changed. One story that comes to my mind, a true story. There was a man in Massachusetts who was to be electrocuted on this certain day. His electrocution had been postponed, reprieved several times. He was reprieved several times. This time it was sure. I know it was sure because one of my relatives was one of the legal witnesses. He was a representative to the general court. He was a legal witness to see the criminal electrocuted. That's all right. The thing that I didn't like and which touched me was they were going to have a nice little lunch just before the electrocution. They were going to get together, have a nice little time waiting for the poor victim to be done away with. And so this relative told me that. And I know that my heart was very heavy. And I went home, and the Master was staying at the house. We had dinner. Then afterwards I told him about it. He didn't say anything, but all evening he was very quiet. He wouldn't talk at all. We sat in the living room, and finally at midnight he went to bed. That's when the electrocution was to be. And so we went to bed. In the morning I came downstairs, went out in the front, opened the front door to get the paper, and there, in big headlines, was so-and-so reprieved. So I took the paper up, ran in, and showed it to the Master. He smiled a little bit, that's all. Now, of course, that isn't positive proof, but to me it is. God can change the pattern, and He can change the pattern for you and for me if it is His will. Why not ask Him? But ask Him with full faith. Show that faith in God by knowing Him, by the practice of the methods which Master has left for us. And so finally, in the art of healing, realize these three things, these three fundamentals that I have told you, plus one other thing that is very essential, and that is, in the art of healing, you must have steady, undying will. That's the thing. That's the thing which most of us do not have. The will must be steady. If you have a disease and you start healing it by any method, you must keep your will active, steadfast, undying until it's consummated. That's one of the most important things. The Master used to tell the story about the little frogs in the pail. You remember the little two frogs in the pail of milk? paddling up and down. The big frog, his will died out. He didn't keep that steady will. But the little frog says, well, trying to jump out of the pail of milk. This was down quite a way, so they couldn't get out. So the frog says, what's the use? You can't never get out of here. So he gave up and died in the milk. But the little fellow says, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to keep trying anyway. So he kept using his steady will, kept paddling away. Finally, he felt something under his feet, something little hard. He paddled as much as he could with his reserve strength, and a little pad of butter came. And so he jumped out to freedom. Why? Because he kept at it. He kept everlastingly using his steady will. And so realize that. Realize that is very necessary. But finally, even though your body is a mist of disease, realize this now. Even though your body is a nest of disease, if you have God with you, if you have His presence with you, in spite of those things, you'll have eternal consciousness, eternal life. As the Master used to say, when life is sweet or death is sweet, if thy song flows through me. That's the first thing. Get that God contact. Then whether you live or not, whether you are sick or not, whether you have a perfectly healthy body or a poor body, makes no difference. Get God. That's the greatest truth in the art of healing.